So basically, how to bring PNPCD to the politicians. And if you have not seen it yet, it's on the website rivershare.org. But this week it's a continuation of last week, and we will talk about, we're discussing about that one. So yeah. So does anybody have any thoughts about process nature-based corridor design and how to bring it to politicians? Any thoughts from last week?
Yeah, I wonder, Ken, sometimes we work in our own little silos. I wonder if there's how much of a need or desire the industry has in general to say, hey, we're going to try to unify as an industry to go after funding and kind of support each other, opposed to just saying, hey, we're going to work as kind of competition in nature-based solutions. So I've definitely felt at different times in my career that there's both people working towards unity and people working towards kind of division and trying to make reason why they're so much better than everybody else in the industry, or why those people are different. So I guess my thought is I think that there'd be enough. I think that there's more people in the industry that would want to try to find some sort of way to unify as an industry, so we can say, hey, we're all trying to do the same general type of work, even though we have different details, but and different methods on how we do it. But I don't know if that's the case with everybody else on the line, or if other people have noticed that it seems like there's folks that really would prefer not to be unified. So
So one of the main things, the first things that I thought about when Lee presented this idea was the name of it: process nature-based corridor design. It's a handful, it's a mouthful. And does anybody have like a better name, or what do you guys think about the name, just to keep this discussion going?
yeah, I wonder if we're coming out of, the politicians are looking for something that's a nature-based solution. Um, and that's a pretty simple name. And then we're kind of in the industry, as Lee had pointed out, is some folks practice natural channel design, folks practice process-based design. So if you put something above that, underneath the natural-based uh, solutions that the politicians are looking for, and you make it a lot more difficult, then I can definitely see the concern of just communicating it. So, my thought is, if we do stream restoration, it doesn't really make sense, because we're talking about more than just streams. So we're talking about corridors as well. And most everybody now is looking at this idea that corridors are uh, inclusive of stormwater best management practices in urban settings and other watershed treatments.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with the idea of having to have something uh, that's a little bit easier. I wonder if, as a industry, we could just kind of send it out to folks as a vote and kind of create a doodle poll and say, hey, we're looking to create this level that we can be inclusive, and kind of put together a flow chart, and then let the industry kind of vote on what they think is an appropriate name. If we set up simple enough, if we'd get responses or not.
Yeah.
So from uh, see. So what's your in the industry so far, since you've been in here, Ken? I mean, is it something where you feel like there's a bigger separation now between natural channel design, process-based design, or do you feel like the separation is getting less?
And this is me optimistically speaking. I think we have improved. We have learned a lot through. Well, I've been in the industry for 7 years, and I think there's less separation now. People are just more aware. To me, these are all, different tools out of the toolbox with different pioneers or different researchers coming out with their own concepts. We don't, like in this PNBCD, we don't call it natural channel design anymore, we call it corridor design, because we learned that, hey, it's not just about the rivers now. It's about the floodplain, it's about the corridor, it's about the watershed. So, and we are learning about process-based, low-tech based design, stage 0, stage 8, and they're all applicable in some way or the other, depending on where you are at and what your goals and objectives of your projects are. So I think in a sense, we are getting more aware as an industry. Anybody want to add to that discussion?
Yeah, I think I agree with kind of the ideas of where you said it's less contentious now than it was probably 15 years ago. And Mike Adams and some other folks that just added on the line, the question is there a need for process, something to fall above process-based design, natural channel design, but below the term of nature-based solutions? And, if so, what are some ideas for that? So that's kind of, as we've continued to have some more people come on the line. But I wonder, as an industry, if we spend too much time kind of worrying about the differences of how we do ecosystem restoration, if that's going to take away the opportunity for us to train others and to be able to do river restoration in places where politicians aren't really sure what they want to do anyways. And if we just making it more conform, it seems like that could be detrimental to our industry and the folks that work in the industry.
Laura said natural watershed corridor design. I like that. It's like watershed and corridor and natural. Now, will the process-based people feel left out? I feel like that's kind of why the word process is in there. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's got to be something that focuses on the landscape as well, Dave. And I think there's a when we're talking about what to call it, you have to be cognizant, as silly as it kind of may seem to some of us, you have to at least be cognizant of the perception that some of these terms carry with others. And they've kind of created this straw man form-based design in some circles, but that's not to say that there aren't folks out there that are really just focused on kind of foisting some shape on the river, and that's I don't think that's what we as a profession ever, or at least rarely, think is the right solution. But those folks, I think, have tainted the kind of the natural channel design approach And it's kind of given some of the so-called process-based folks some ammunition. And you might even say rightfully so. So it is kind of it's unfortunately sort of a quasi-political pile of baggage that we got to deal with, when we term something, because these days people are really kind of looking for ways to separate and be different rather than kind of focusing on what's similar among these different ideas and these different philosophies for river restoration. And I think clearly the focus does have to be on the projects I think that we're most successful on are the ones where we clearly understand the driving processes and we understand the river response to those processes. And then we're able to affect some sort of change by working with those processes, right? And so I think if we just kind of focus on some terminology surrounding that, maybe that's a start. I don't know if I can say anything worthwhile, but it's early and I've only had 4 sips of tea. But I'm trying to get at, this is going to be tough. And I just think the wording that was on the slides last week is just a little bit clumsy. And it sort of comes across to me as kind of foisting the word process in there. But I think, if we focus on the landscape, focus on the riverscape, something like that, to where we're really to convey the idea that, yeah, we are approaching these projects holistically, and we're looking at function across the landscape. We're looking at processes across the landscape. We're looking at river response, and the only thing we can really measure is river form, right? That's what we measure when we're in the field, is the physical form, the morphometry of the channel. These things all have to be in there, but I think that the stumbling thing I have immediately is just sort of that wording of the program. It's kind of a word salad. I apologize, but
yeah, and that's why we're here discussing this part. It's like the PNBCD, and so it's a mouthful. In a sense, it's just like a first step to reconcile like both camps, kind of, in a way. So is there? So I was asking about suggestions on what else can we name it, and then you did mention riverscapes, which is like a new term too. So we'll get this camera. Yeah. Yeah, and then so now we're talking about nature-based design, on how we're going to meet that and bring it to politicians. Say, hey, this is what the nation wants. How are we going to bring this up as a unified concept or unified group? To bring it to them, and then and how are we going to bring it to them? Those are questions that natural functional design. Tina, nice.
Ken, one of the things I think about is that the current administration has put out, the White House has put out a lot of opportunities to create kind of AmeriCorps type programs around nature-based solutions in the future. So they want to start creating programs to provide work to folks and training for folks as well, and youth. And in general, nobody's out there saying, well, this is how you do these training courses. This is how we're going to end up training the next generation to be stewards of these natural corridors. So I think for us, there's almost an urgency in the industry to say, hey, let's find a way that we can be talking about different types and treatments of restoration at different levels without kind of getting people to camp up amongst themselves. So, to your point, Mike, I kind of agree some with some of these words are kind of silly, but it's like, well, if we have to throw something out there just to kind of get everybody to stop complaining about it. Is it valuable? Or if we throw something out there to get them to stop complaining about the differences, then we're actually going to make them complain about something else instead. And I see that from both sides of the camp, the form-based side of the camp and the process-based side of the camp. So,
Yeah, I just want to break down this. I think it's a pretend wall between these two. I don't think these two camps exist. I mean, if you're doing form-based design without considering processes, you're doing it wrong.
That's right.
In my opinion. So
Yeah, that's true.
I don't want to give legs to anything that would suggest that the profession is, people in the profession are advocating for, trying to make the river do something that it doesn't want to otherwise naturally do. And so, I would like to see this. I would like to see this dichotomy go away. And maybe it is something as simple as just saying nature-based river design or nature-based stream design. Yeah. Something that I think somebody threw that out there the other day. That is more simple. That's an umbrella that we can all fit under, right? So
yeah, and that's what we're trying to fit under too, just nature-based river design. And to your point, Mike, like I've never heard of someone in the industry say, "Oh, we're form-based."
Yeah,
I've never heard of someone say that.
Heard a lot of people say they're form-based, but not.
Yeah, I've had a lot of people ask me to come and present on form-based design at places. Yeah. So they're like, "Hey, we're doing a conference. We want you to kind of present on the form-based design." It's like, okay, that's fine. So I just take it because my thought is, well, if they're asking us to talk, we might as well be there available and talk to them and hear kind of concerns. But I do hear a lot of people that have spent a day or a half day at a pre-conference workshop and learned about process-based design and quickly will say, well, we definitely don't want to do form-based design. We want to do process-based design. So I think that there is in the industry a push towards a number of folks that probably just don't understand how to do design enough to know that you can't really separate the form from the process. And there's certain times that you can make a decision to say, hey, we want to encourage just the process of floodplain connectivity, but you still have to decide where to put in structures at some point if you're going to be building them, which is still a form. So
I believe it gets into almost like the green infrastructure LID, where if your design is cost less on the capital, if you can show it's cost less from even a initial capital 75% of the time, it's more aesthetic, it's more it improves ecosystem services, it's more the things that people want, then can you call it anything other than good? I mean, is it just good design? I mean, where does it, why wouldn't you use something like that if it checks all those boxes other than, just haven't been trained in it? But I do think it's, I mean, we put this false name out there, different name, green infrastructure, to suppose it's to describe something different than everybody else is doing, which is necessary. But is it really anything other than just being a good engineer? I don't know. I agree. You need something to differentiate, but it's really goes back to it's just being a good designer.
Yeah, and I think the question that I would have, Wade, for you is, we're going to have a lot of people that are kind of saying, hey, we can do this, that aren't coming from a designer or an engineering background. So it's about creating enough education so that people can promote value in some sort of design process or some sort of stewardship process, opposed to just saying, hey, that's for the engineers to do. Because I think that's what the folks that are coming from a process-based design right now are doing very well, is they're basically empowering a lot of people and doing a lot of education and telling them, hey, do process-based design, not form-based design. But they're empowering folks that probably will never be doing design, will never be engineers, And I think that's something that, as an industry, we probably need to try to figure out how we can do that, but do it in such a way where we, don't just kind of move towards only low tech type ideas, or a preference on low tech type ideas when there's a need for something that is more engineered.
Has anyone tried to do low tech solutions in a urban system?
Yeah, well, some of the folks I work with up in Oregon have did what I would describe as a fairly low tech approach on a project outside of Portland. But it was, it had everything. You could check all the boxes. It was flat, it was sediment starved. Beaver were already there. So it was a pretty easy, it wasn't much of a push to get it from incision to, extreme floodplain connectivity. It's a gorgeous project, and it really wasn't, it wasn't super expensive. And I think but again, it wasn't urban in the sense that it was in the middle of downtown, but it was surrounded by suburbia, lots of stormwater conveyance facilities or stormwater facilities around, and lots of outfalls, that kind of thing. But so it's been done. So I think that there's opportunities for these more low tech approaches to be successful. And again, I think so much of it is just, I tend to lean towards, I understand and appreciate and agree with many of the arguments that some of the people that are on the so-called process side are making, because it's always been my belief that to develop a good design, you have to understand what's going on the site, right? You need to understand what's driving the disturbance, what's causing this river to become unstable, why are there no fish, why are there no bugs, why why you have to ask a bunch of whys before you should even start trying to fix something. And I've seen lots of examples where that step isn't occurring, and it does almost seem that some of these processes are being ignored. But I also don't think that the answer is just to always let the river do whatever it wants, because you can't, that's kind of why we're here, right? I mean, the river is already doing what it wants and it's going to win eventually. And so we're trying to sort of nudge it in one direction or another. But you can't just, I think that resetting a valley has limited applications, and it has to be the right kind of valley. And I'm concerned that with some of these approaches, that from their perspective, they're going to end up putting the wrong solution, the wrong type of valley with the wrong sediment and hydrologic regime. And you're going to start to see a bunch of failures in those too, just like some of the NCD stuff you saw in urban areas in the early 2000s. It was the wrong solution. It was the wrong idea. And I think we've all got those in our history that if we could go back and change them, we would. But
So
I'm trying to get too preachy on this, but
that's all right. As a group of people, do we think that there is kind of a need for us to have a unified a level of, hey, this is what we call stream restoration, corridor restoration, that includes the other tools that we've had from our toolboxes in the past, so natural channel design, process-based design. Do we really feel like there's an overwhelming need for that, or do we think just nature-based solutions is fine, and just try to push the idea for nature-based solutions? What's people's thoughts on that?
Well, Mike had, yeah, go ahead, Mike.
No, go ahead, Ken. I was
Oh yeah,
trying to
I was just
speak.
echoing what you had said earlier. I think maybe, with the whole mumbo jumbo of words, I think just nature-based corridor design itself, I think that would be sufficient.
Yeah, when the industry started throwing around the nature-based terminology a few years ago, I recoiled against it a little bit because it felt to me like it was some corporate green speak that was being kicked around. But I think it's become something that has some utility for us and for the types of work that we're trying to do. And Dave Grant and I had this conversation a year or so ago about the difference in urban restoration and in some settings in an urban area. And I shouldn't probably speak for Grant, but what he and I were kind of talking about was the differences in just in boundary conditions alone that you're having to deal with in some of these urban areas where, to me, that's where the danger of labeling some of these approaches as nature-based can get a little dubious if we're armoring if the solution is to armor, right? Because sometimes that's what we have to do. It's not a restoration project. It's a stream armoring. It's a stream stability project. The desired outcome is stability above all else. And I've often said that we should be taking the word restoration off of these plan sets when we're not really restoring anything. All we're doing is trying to be smarter about how we armor and stabilize.
Yeah.
Stabilization, repair,
and so
engineering.
and so that could just be a slice under this umbrella of nature-based. I'm starting to become convinced that this word nature-based is not just corporate kind of greenwashing. It is there is some value there, and I think that the community is starting to understand, to kind of have a similar it's a similar understanding of what that can entail within the profession.
Yeah. Cool. We are approaching 6:30 now. So and I think with the number of people on here, I think it is a good discussion. And shall be carried on next time. We have talked about a bunch of stuff, the name of it, and then how to. Oh, sorry, I was reading the comments. A national standard.
Yeah, I apologize for getting on late. Where's Lebo this morning?
I'm probably getting his kids to school, I'm guessing.
Okay, that's right. He mentioned this was a tough time.
Levo, you call Levo.
Lebo, yeah.
Nice. I worked with him for 6 years, never knew people call him that. So yeah,
I do think, Lee, one of the things that Lee and I were discussing is that what we generally look at is kind of the more engineered restoration is going to be something that's going to have a preference towards urban settings in the future. And when we're talking about a green-based, natural, nature-based solution and an infrastructure bill, it's going to be urban-based. So when we're creating jobs at a national level for folks, it's the jobs associated with nature-based solutions are going to be kind of in urban settings. So so that's a big deal, because a lot of the training that's being done is saying, hey, if you want to do corridor restoration and put a form in place, if you will, that's kind of something that you do on rural systems, not urban systems, even where some of the people teach and say, well, if you're in an urban setting, just move. So I do think as an industry, there's going to be a big need for kind of education and figuring out what it is that we can teach people how to do. If there are make work programs for youth, and then what it is that we can't teach people how to do, and you need to get a higher level expertise involved.
Yeah, that's true. And another thing, Ken, about nature-based solutions, it is applicable. I think that terminology is more applicable in urban settings than maybe stream restoration is a lot of times, right? Because you can still take a nature-based approach, right?
Yeah.
We can still impart a lot of improvement to the system using some of these working with the natural processes, right? Understanding the how sediment moves through those systems. We can or if it's sediment starved, there's that, those, I mean, those all work better. I think that terminology works better in urban than stream restoration does, because we're not really restoring, right? But we are creating something that's viable, that's more natural, if you allow that phrase to be used.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there is some utility in just keeping it simple.
Keeping it simple.
Yeah.
And
I think when you start to talk to elected officials, they're going to understand nature-based design,
Oh, yeah.
nature-based stream design better than they're going to understand this process. I can't remember what it was, but
process nature-based
so
corridor design.
yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
if we just did something like nature-based corridor design, that's probably fine. Essentially, we're just using the words they use, and we're just making a category for
Yeah.
corridor design.
I think it might be wise to say river corridor, or stream corridor, because I don't know that linkage is going to necessarily be made by folks that aren't into rivers like we are, that we're talking
people might
about
think
the
it's
stream
a
corridor,
roadway.
the riverscape.
So
maybe not.
Maybe for or
Yeah, I mentioned riverscapes in there. That's a very Joey
I like the word. I like that word, but
yeah. All right, with that, we are at 2 minutes past the tech talk time. So, and Dave did mention